Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to St. Thomas, Ontario. What do we find here? We find SOLRS. We're going to find out what that means in a moment. But as promised, Huron County, we are here investigating a possibility of bringing a train into Huron County. To help me to do that, I have met some old-timers here, and first I will start with the vice president of this organization. Why don't I ask you, Rebecca, what does a SOLRS mean?
The SOLRS stands for the Southern Ontario Locomotive Restoration Society. We are known as SOLRS, or we also operate a train excursion as St. Thomas Central Railway.
This museum, I wish you could be here to see the artifacts. You would just, I tell you something, the very locomotive we're in front of here is a locomotive that was in Huron County not that long ago, and I want to now introduce to you some of those old-timers that keep all this running and operating. Sir, you are?
Donald Broadbear.
Donald.
I'm retired off the Canadian Pacific Railway.
Well, Donald, you have a son. There's a second generation of you here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's with us here today.
Let's meet the son. Folks, this gentleman, your name, sir?
I'm Roy Broadbear.
Roy, father-son operation, it's always nice to see that happen, and it's nice to see mechanical people of mechanical ability to run these things, to help it, to operate, to keep it up and keep it in the shape it's in. This is pretty amazing stuff you have here.
Well,
now, Donald,
it's hard work.
You have two of your own locomotives. Now they're a little bit newer, the diesels. They're outside, and how is it you love this so much?
They're 1950s. They're not that new.
Okay.
So they're 40 or 50 years old.
Okay.
You gotta, as time goes along, at this engine, we need backup. When this engine's out, it's 80 years old, and it gives us some kind of failure of any nature. Well, we need a backup. And then we quite often do a pull-push operation. When you're going over the crossings, we have a locomotive at both ends for going over the crossings when we're going any distance. Mm-hmm. So it works out quite nice for us. It's not a very big engine. It's only what they call 500 horsepower. It's about as small as they make them. Mm-hmm. It's one of the few locomotives that does have antifreeze in it. So the bigger engines, they don't put any antifreeze in them, and it becomes a problem in the wintertime with them. You either got to drain them and not use them, or have them in a heated building, and we're okay there, eh?
Or just simply run them all the time.
Well, that's what the big companies have to do. They have to leave them running all night, and that becomes very costly at fuel today. Mm-hmm. It would be out of our possibility to do that, eh?
Just so you know, Don Broadbear is our Chief Mechanical Officer. Mm-hmm. So anything that we need to know about this engine, he's the one who tells us.
I kind of gathered that.
Yeah.
That was interesting. But I kind of put two and two together. I didn't ask her this question, so I didn't pry. I was not privy of that information. However, I kind of gathered that father-son deal. Yeah. I seen you in a coach out there doing some repairs. I kind of thought, well. And then knowing that you have a diesel out there, it takes a little bit of know-how to keep these things running.
Yeah, that's right. And then all these big wheels are heavy. Last year we had to lift this whole engine up in the air and take one of these big wheels out, and do a little work in the bearing, and we put it back together, and it's been successful this summer.
Wow.
We were worried about that not being repairable, but it seemed it's running cool again. So we were glad we conquered that problem.
Man, you have some awesome stuff here. I don't know. I think, folks, this is pretty amazing. You need to see some of this. It is not just yesteryears, but I don't know how many museums we would have in a country of this caliber. St. Thomas, Ontario, your municipality here seem to be wanting or not wanting, or however this is happening, somebody's pulling the rug from under you. How could this happen?
Well, we're not really quite sure. We've talked to the City Council many times, and they don't seem to be very receptive to say why they don't want what we have or give any indication of what we could do to keep it a very viable tourist operation in town. And that's unfortunate that the city doesn't give us that indication or recognition for what we are and how many people from all over the world that could come here and be a part of this with us.
I dare say, with having this sort of outlet here and this sort of exposure to history, this has to be looked at with a second eye. I mean, somebody needs to put glasses on and really look at this all over again and see what you really have here. How we are investigating a possibility of certainly, worst comes to worst, have you over for a visit, but I know that there is a lot of aspiration there to maybe open our hearts and maybe ask you to make it a second home. I don't know, but how do you feel about things like that?
Oh, I'd feel very welcome to any ideas, such as just whether we come to visit you again or whether one day we have to relocate in that area. It's too early to tell all that right now. I know so far that any homes that we have been offered, they've come to us. We haven't gone to them. So that's very encouraging that whatever St. Thomas doesn't want, obviously somebody else does.
Having this in your backyard be quite the thing. Tourist attraction? Man, this is a lot to give up. Let us know a little more about the organization, who you are. We've talked about a possibility of maybe extending this organization by a few members down to our neck of the woods. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, that would be fine. But one thing I will do at this point is I'll turn this over to Roy, because he was the man who, back in 2003, brought our steam train with the help of Don and other volunteers that we had at the time up to your area. So he would be the best person to answer questions like these for you.
Tell us a little bit about the last visit you had to Huron County.
It was a lot of work. It was 2 years in the planning, and it takes about a year to organize it, but the first time out it was a little bit of extra planning. And it was a huge success. And the train was sold out. We were on a tour of the Goderich-Exeter line, and I think we were gone for nearly a month, and 1,300 miles in total, which is a lot for this little engine.
Wow.
And it was an ambitious project, but it was a big success, and the run to Goderich was the most successful in terms of being sold out. But it's a long way for this little engine to go, and it was a long day, and it was pretty tough on the machinery, but it was worth it. That being on the train, rolling into Goderich for the first time, and seeing the whole town turned out all along the track, cheering us on as we pulled into town, and then the mayor was there and gave us a flag of the town, and very special. We enjoyed the day immensely, and everybody was pleased to see us there. Could we go again? Well, it's a lot of work, and it's possible, but there are a lot of things up in the air for us right now. As Becky mentioned, we may be looking for a new home. We've got the machinery, and we've got the know-how and the manpower to restore it and operate it, and that's our mandate. We need a place to work, and we need a place to run. And if the tracks are gone, we'll be looking for someplace else to run.
Don, you must have been operating it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I was the first one up in the morning to put the fire in, the last one at night to put it out. So it was a long day for the head end people. There's a little more involved in looking after the engine with regards to getting the engine ready to go in the morning and putting it away at night. And then we had to make a run. Our coal car was 2 or 3 miles away. We had to run up with the light engine to put coal on every night and get ready for the next day.
This here is fascinating, and fascinating to me. History is coming alive, and steam trains, there are not many out there anymore.
Oh, no, that's right. No, there's not many steam engines left.
This is history.
As we look around and see this shop, we really feel bad about having to leave this shop. And it's so big, and it's one of the last back shops left in North America. And they've all been knocked down. This is about the only one left that we know of. Way out in British Columbia, I think there's one left. But at any rate, as you can see, the amount of room we have here, it's hard to put something up that's compatible to go to another area. You know, a muster. We got a pit under this thing, etc. And it just goes on and on.
Oh yeah. There is no way that you could repeat or you could build a building like this. This is mega.
Yeah.
This would be a few millions of dollars too.
I know, yeah, that's right.
And all across Ontario, if you go to a park, that's where most of our steam engines are. They're in a park just sitting there with decay and rusting away. At least we want to keep ours alive and keep it moving if possible.
We're hoping that there will be some people watching this who can make a difference, who can come to you and do something for you to preserve you and preserve this in St. Thomas. That would be first option.
Yes.
I know that that's your first love. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We don't really want to move from St. Thomas if we can avoid it. I mean, Don originally was from London when he set up most of the stuff around here. He was part founder of Port Stanley Terminal Rail and OSR. He also was Pinafore Park Railroad for a number of years. That's how him and I met. In 1993, he brought this steam engine to these shops in 500 pieces to restore it. And he lived in London most of this time while he was doing this, and now lives here with his wife Erica here in St. Thomas. And he doesn't want to go anywhere if he doesn't have to, that's for sure.
This will not die. I don't think we can allow that.
Well, I don't think we can either, but we just got to wait and see what happens in the next few months or so, and by the time our season is done this year, we'll see if where we go from here.
We've been offered a tour through this place, so let's go and show you what is in here, just so for you to have an idea. First of all, the locomotive that we're in front of, or on the side of, I should say, is the locomotive. It is very operational. This was the one that was in Huron County, and this is the one they can bring back, but there is more things here to see. A lot of people don't even know that you exist and that you're here.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
If it were just to turn around even, where you can see a truck in progress here, 1950, a diesel locomotive truck, which we're in the process of restoring. And they just got so many miles they got to come out and be done. That's all. It's that simple.
4 steamers and the progressive restoration as well.
Okay.
It's a 1930.
It's
1924 steamer, you said, is in process?
No, 124.
It's built in 1930.
Okay.
It's one of the few engines that was built in the Kingston Locomotive Works. It's not it's one of the few engines that are left that were built in Kingston, Ontario.
All right, well, let's go and walk around, and you'll give us a tour, and we'll see what is in this museum. And folks, we have now come to the most north part of this museum. We're in the northern side, and boy, do we have some stuff to show you here. Just behind us, Rebecca, this is quite the place. I'm really impressed.
Oh yes, it's a wonderful place. My husband and I have been members of both the museum as well as SOLRS for now 12 years. We're the youngest generation of family memberships, I believe, in both groups, and we just would hate to see any of this ever come to an end. That's for sure. Now at this time I must leave, but I'll introduce you to our friend Charlie Sterne. He's the Elgin County Railway Museum.
How are you?
Charlie, welcome, Charlie.
Glad to meet you.
This is Dan Byelis, and at this time I would just like to say that if in fact we can't secure a home here, then of course we will have to leave and find a home elsewhere. But that's just a part of what this is all about, right?
Rebecca, if I have this pegged right, I don't think you will have any problems finding a home. And there's some people who will be watching this video who will be able to make a comment or two on what you just said, and I would not lose any sleep over that. However, it would be shame, folks, if you saw this museum, if you saw this building, this would be a shame to lose. But you know, there are local politicians who may think otherwise, and developers who may think otherwise, so you have to be ready for anything, and I understand your heart.
That's right. I mean, we do. I mean, my husband was hoping that one day he'd preserve his railway past in this museum, and if there's no tracks to bring it here, then it's pretty hard to keep the spirit alive right here in St. Thomas. And it's just unfortunate that we don't have the support we need from the city here that we might get from somewhere else.
Rebecca Else is the Vice President of this organization, and Rebecca will leave us now. Rebecca, I want to thank you for welcoming us here and giving us the tour. However, Charlie is in charge now, and Charlie will take us through and hopefully show us a thing or two. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. You guys have a nice day.
Okay. Charles, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
Well, for a young fellow, you seem to know a lot about this place, and I understand we're left in very good hands, so Rebecca tells us.
Okay.
And, well, let's begin with, we'll go from the north and work our way to the south. Well, Charlie, first of all, let's look at this huge train here. There's a locomotive here. 5700 is a number that's on it. So tell us more of the history of this train.
Okay, this was built in 1930 for the for passenger service on CN, Toronto to Montreal. In later years, it was running through up to Sarnia. It's a Hudson locomotive, which means the wheel arrangements, there's 4 wheels in the front, there's 6 wheels here and 4 down there, and that makes it a Hudson. It's a high-speed locomotive. It's got very high wheels, which would give it speed.
When you say high speed, what are we talking here?
Well, the railways, of course, are limited on how fast you can go, but at one time, passenger trains had more of a right of way than freight. Now it's freight all the way. The freight wants the right of way, they get it. But in those days, the passenger, a lot of people went by train, and they wanted to get from point A to B pretty quickly. So that's why they had high wheels on it.
So hooked up to this Hudson, we have us, would that be something like a package for a post or so whatever?
That's what it was. We use it here for artifacts. It's a railway wall of fame up there with a memorial to all sorts of old railroaders. But it was originally an express car. And then next to it, this old...
We're also going to go inside some of these things, and as we do that, we will let our camera go and maybe take some footage inside, just to give our viewers a little closer eye view. Now, let's talk about the thing directly behind us here. What is Wabash or whatever?
The Wabash Railroad was an American railroad that came up into Canada. It still does, except it's now called the Norfolk Southern. And they had running rights over the Canadian National Line on the north end of town. Wabash 51 was the first diesel engine in Canada. I'm sorry, I got to correct that. First diesel engine on the Wabash and the first diesel engine in St. Thomas. And it still works. It can pull that out in the yard with not too much trouble.
I understand, 500 horsepower.
Oh, that, yeah. And it's got engines on both ends, and it's quite a good locomotive. It still needs some restoring inside, but that's cosmetic restoration. It runs very well.
You people are surprisingly good at this. Have you ever restored some of these things? It's beautiful to see. I don't think they were like that when they were new.
Well, I'm not in the group that restores things. I work more on the business sides.
We just met Donnie just a little while ago there, and him and his son, and boy, do they know their stuff.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay, let's go. Now we're going to show you folks a real workhorse. What a locomotive. This has got 4 big wheels. What is this? This is not a Hudson, is it?
No, this is a Northern.
Northern.
4 wheels in front, 4 drive wheels on each side. That's it'd be 8 altogether.
Right.
So there's a 4, 8, and 4 in the back, and that's a Northern. 484 is a Northern. This engine came in here 5 or 6 years ago to be converted from coal to oil. It's owned by Mr. Tom Payne of Faroe Equus Railways. and it's being ready to be moved out west. It's going out to Seattle, Washington, and it's going to travel under its own steam, I understand, to Western Canada. Right now they're doing some overhauling. This young lady, Kay, up here, she's a real grease monkey. She likes to get herself all dirty and so on and so forth.
Kay, can we have you come down for a moment? I want to talk to you too. This is one of the biggest in the world, am I correct?
Well, there's bigger ones. One of the biggest in the world is called a big boy, and it's 484, and they were from the Union Pacific Railroad. They were the biggest. Everything in here is local from this whole general area. This one isn't, but you wouldn't bring a big boy in here for that very reason.
Yeah.
But they'd be very expensive to restore.
Kay, I understand. Listen, it's a pleasure talking to you. I see you restoring there and doing something. What are you doing to it?
Right now I'm working on the throttle. I'm grinding down because it's been unused for so long that it's seized. So I'm grinding it down so we can add a new part.
So I see you're in the work coveralls, and boy, I see you jumping up and down that train. I see you 1 minute you're on top of it, next time you're down. How'd you do that?
Think like a monkey.
That's why they call her a grease monkey, huh? Is that possible?
Oh, someday she comes in, she's well dressed, and she takes people on tours, just like I usually do.
That's what I hear. But so you're also jack of all trades, huh?
Exactly. You have to be to work in a place like this.
Okay, I met you earlier, and you were also very hospitable and willing to show us around. Now, this here train, show me, this has got to be what, about, I'm going to guess, 10 feet high?
16.
16 feet from the rail on up to the highest part?
No, from where I was standing.
From where you were standing. So 16 feet high.
16 feet, yes.
You notice the drive wheels are smaller than they are on 5700.
Okay.
Because it was a freight locomotive, you see, and you need the torque, so that you had smaller wheels.
Carrying 50 cars, it got up to 60 to 70 miles an hour.
Wow. Yesterday's technology that is still mesmerizing a great many people even today. I can't imagine seeing one of these things on a rail passing by. That would be an impressive thing to see. Yesteryears were good ones.
Oh, yeah. They're, right now, though, and in defense of diesels, they're much more efficient than a diesel. And for instance, say running from Toronto out to Vancouver, they'd have to switch the engines up around Thunder Bay and so on and so forth. Now all they switch are the train crews, and they'll run out to Vancouver and back again with the diesels. So.
All right. Well, Charlie, what about this next thing? What is this we're watching here?
New York Central. This is a sleeping car ran on the New York Central, but it ran through St. Thomas on its way from Chicago to New York, or New York to Chicago, depending which way it was going. Yeah. And there's beds all along there.
How old is this?
This was built in 1939.
1939. This is in immaculate shape.
Well, that was restored. If you look on the other side of it, this is all lovely on this side. You look on the other side, it's pretty rough. And that's because it was restored on one side only. But inside, there's a lot of work to do on the inside. At one time, it was a real luxury way to travel.
Oh boy, at one time, I mean, it still is. If you just look at this, of course, we'll give you a view inside as well, and it is quite impressive. Here we go into a little more modern times. We're looking at a diesel now.
Well, this diesel was the only one like it ever built. It's called an RS-18, built by Montreal Locomotive Works. And it's being restored. There's no engines in it. Canadian Pacific gave it to us. They had it as an experimental locomotive, and I say it was the only one ever built. This hood at one time ran right up to the top, this front hood. And the Canadian Pacific decided to cut it down for visibility purposes. But we just did some searching to find out where the original hood was. We thought we'd restore it with the original hood on, and it's being used as a chicken coop in Montreal. It's gray only because that's the primer coat.
This thing was used, you said, as a chicken coop?
Just the hood. The old hood. The old hood's still being used as a chicken coop, and it ran to the roof.
Wow.
And but Canadian Pacific cut it down. This is running on a number of railways. Canadian Pacific out of the end was on Canadian National one time, and one time it was on the Pacific Great Eastern, which became the British Columbia Railway, which was bought recently by Canadian National.
Okay, Charlie, and what are we looking at now? What is this?
This engine right here hasn't been here very long, just in the past few months. It sat for years down in Procor's office in Oakville. Procor is a tank car rental outfit, big outfit all over the world. At least I've seen them in Britain. And this engine was on display down there, and for some reason or other they brought it in there just for display, and then they decided to get rid of it. They gave it to the Southern Ontario Locomotive Restoration Society. It's going to be restored, but it's still sitting here doing not much at all. And it's different from some of the other locomotives on it. It has a steam brake on it instead of an air brake. The controls are, well, they do the same thing, but they're in different places to what it is on a lot of locomotives. It's a very small thing. It's a workhorse locomotive, usually the type you find in mines or gravel pits and things like that. It's a saddle tank, and you notice there's a tank over top of the boiler, and that's the saddle, and it's full of water on that saddle tank, instead of having a water in a tender behind. And then they usually use little bins down in here for coal. Rather than some tank engines will have a small little bin on the back, but that one doesn't. But there was a place down on the side there to hold the coal.
And here, folks, we have what appears to be one and only locomotive, and this is electric one. Talk to us about this one.
This ran on the London Port Stanley Railway starting about 1914 right up until the early 60s. London Port Stanley Railway ran from London down to Port Stanley through St. Thomas, and they had 3 of these electric locomotives. I think it was 3 or 4, 3 I think. And it's was brought in here. It had been sitting in the National Railway Museum in Ottawa for a long time, and it was just rotting away up there. So it was brought in here and cosmetically restored. And it's been here a few years now. But it was a real workhorse. When I first moved to this area, I can remember them running through London and hauling trains. They also had a couple of diesels which have disappeared. They went to Canadian National, and Canadian National bought the railway. And Canadian National dieselized the whole thing. On top, you can see there's pantographs.
Yes.
To pick up the electricity.
Right. So there was lines over the rail where...
Yes, those all lines, just like a streetcar, you know?
Right. Interesting history. Well, folks, let's go move on. Next, I think we'll go and see some cabooses. Folks, you usually see one of these at the end of the train. What are we looking at? The first one there.
Well, that's a Norfolk and Western caboose, built in 1975. It's all steel. And they're not used anymore, but this ran through this area. The Norfolk Western is now the Norfolk Southern, and it still comes through St. Thomas. The one here, Grand Trunk Western caboose, the Grand Trunk Western caboose is it was built in 1891, and it's the comparison between the modern and the old. This one here ran originally from up to London up to Chicago, on the Grand Trunk Western, which was a Canadian National division over in the States. It originally had a much taller cupola up there, and they cut it down in order to go through the St. Clair Tunnel after the tunnel was built. And if you go inside, you'll see that the facilities inside are much rougher here, oil lamps and so on, where it's all electric there. It's carried its own generators down there to generate electricity. There's electric refrigerators in the steel one. Here, this one has beds in it too, because the long distance, the train crew would sleep on board. That one doesn't. The steel one doesn't have beds in.
Okay, now for those of us who need to be further educated as to who was staying in these cabooses, there's opinions of those who said conductors and whatever. But why don't you bring us up to speed and tell our viewers, for those who may not know, who actually stayed in these things and why?
Well, at that time, there was 5 men on a train. The engineer, fireman, and the front-end brakeman would ride up the front. The conductor and the rear-end brakeman would ride back here in the caboose. And it was sort of a headquarters for the train crew. Nowadays, there's only 2 men on a train, and they're both up front. That's why they've done away with the cabooses altogether, and they have the nickname Fred, a little light thing on the front, on the rear end, that tells what's the trouble with the caboose or what's the trouble with the train. The cupola is on top so that they can see the train and see for hot boxes and what have you.
Yeah, if they were to lose a caboose or a part of the train, there would be some communication there. Today, that's done electronically.
That's right. Today is all done electronically.
All right. Well, let's go see something else, folks. Well, folks, what you're looking at right now is the train actually that was in Goderich before and may be there again. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Hi, how are you? This is my son, Alexander. He is the biggest train fan of them all. He feels number 9 is his engine, not SOLRS engine, so...
Isn't that how the legacy is passed on, though?
Absolutely. It's no better to pass it from one generation to the next, and hopefully the next generation will keep it alive just as we hope to.
Rebecca, I want to thank you for Charles here. Charlie, sir, Charlie Sterne, you've been very, very kind, and thank you for the tour.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure working with you, and seeing all this museum was just an awesome experience.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay.
And now, one more time, Rebecca, there is an engine that is connected to that. That is Don's, I guess, diesel, one of the two?
Yes, that's Don's Diesel 10. He leases it to the society to use as a backup engine for when our number 9 needs an extra push or pull. Yeah.
Okay, now there's some more cars the other side.
Yes, that's correct. One is the geometry car. It's a car STCR 15,000, and we call it our business car, but it's a very, very nice car. And the other one that's just over the roadway a bit there is car 5504, and it has windows that just slightly open up on top to give you a little bit of relief. Yeah.
Well, here we are, folks. We have to finish now. The time is run out. We stand in front of a great museum. It is what a landmark and what a place. Indeed, we've enjoyed the day. Thank you for the tour. Thank you for your hospitality. And we hope to see you in Huron County very, very soon. And hopefully we'll see more of you.
Oh, yes. I'm looking forward to coming up there and just seeing what you guys have to offer there as well. It's been wonderful getting to know you guys today. Okay. We really appreciate that.
Rebecca, thank you. On behalf of Huron County and everybody that will see this, thank you very much.
Thank you.